What did you hear? I'm just going to get over your shoulder.
I acted everywhere. Anyone that would have me. But
Yeah.
you never came to one of my shows.
Like, what did you do?
When?
I acted all the time.
What year?
Constantly. Well, I think I pretty much had stopped by the time I met you guys. I
Yeah,
just did
you must have.
I did a few other things.
So I didn't come to. When did I come to Atlanta?
Came to see me
If you actually want to move a little closer to her, that would be good too. That would be good.
But I'm gay.
I can kick him if I get mad at what he says.
Destroy. I hope I ever have him having
And
children.
actually, what I do, I think I'm going to move.
Darn.
Not likely.
Don't move.
I'm not likely.
I'm going to move over here. And that might actually be a little bit more,
What do you think?
more sunshine.
I can turn my chair this way.
If you'll just, let's see, look at David. Actually, that's kind of a, I don't know.
Whatever makes me look thinnest. That's what's important.
Well, if you
Look at that buddy now.
if you would do me a favor, and for the camera, if you would pronounce your name and spell your name, and then y'all can just get going. Make sure
Okay.
you just speak
Print
up.
out.
Okay, just speak up. Okay.
Go for it.
So hello. Good
Well, hi.
afternoon. Welcome to Atlanta.
Thank you, Dave.
And tell me your name.
Eva Salzer.
Eva Salzer. How do you spell that?
EVASALZER.
Okay, all right. Well, it's September 9th, 2004. 2004. And we're welcoming you to Atlanta. And
It's great to
tell
be
us-
here.
Oh, yeah. How long has it been since you've been here?
I was here in 1996 for the Olympics,
That's the last
which
time.
was fabulous.
Wow.
But yeah, my God, that's
That's 8
8 years ago.
8 years. Wow.
Yeah, that's the last time I was here.
Wow. So when did you first come to Atlanta?
I moved here my last year in college, which must have been 1971.
Oh, 1971. Oh, that's when I came here, too.
But we didn't know each other
Didn't know
back
each other.
then.
No, didn't meet each other. And you grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, right? Okay. And your father was a cantor,
Yes.
right? Okay. And you have an older sister,
Aggie, yeah.
Maggie. Okay. And a mother.
Yes, my mother, Margaret.
Or Eva, how about Dave? How about if Eva tells us just a general background?
Okay.
That'd be kind of cool.
You want to hear my...
Yeah, just a little.
My upbringing?
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
born in a trunk.
Just about.
Yeah.
I was born in Honduras, actually, because my parents were Holocaust survivors, and after the war they went to Honduras because they couldn't get a visa anywhere else. So,
They were from Hungary.
yes, they were from Hungary. So they lived there for 4 years and took 4 years to get a visa to the U.S. So that's where I was born, and I think I was 8 months old when we left there. Quite ill. I guess I almost died there from the milk or gastritis or whatever I had, and the nuns tried to get my parents to baptize me.
Oh.
They said, your baby will only live if you're baptized. And of course, my parents, being very religious Jews, said no, and I lived anyway.
And you lived anyway.
And I lived anyway. So and then I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. I would say I had a happy childhood. Religious. Went to Hebrew school and was confirmed and all that good stuff, and strong belief in God. And I went to University of Delaware for college and majored in medical technology. And my last year I finished in Georgia State.
Okay.
And then I was at Crawford Long Hospital, which I see is now changed to Emory Crawford Hospital for my internship. And really, I enjoyed being a medical technologist for 7 years. And then I got inspired by holistic health and decided to become a chiropractor. Changed my life, changed my diet, became vegetarian, did polarity, massage, therapy, everything, and went to Life Chiropractic College, where I got my chiropractic degree in 1981.
81.
Mm-hmm.
81.
Yeah. No, 82, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
December 82.
I was thinking it
82.
It was later than that. Yeah. So, tell me about, you first came to Atlanta in 71.
Right.
Okay, and you finished your last year at Georgia State.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I graduated in 70.
What was Atlanta like when you came here in 71? What kind of town? How would you describe it?
I don't know. I lived in East Point, which I hated, and it was a very depressing, country kind of place to live. And as soon as I could, I moved into the Virginia Highland area, where I made some of my best friends, and we had a wonderful time. I loved it. So it was nice. It was nice. And then in 1978, is that right, 78, when I met Elizabeth?
I think it was, yeah.
I was kind of fed up with the dating scene.
So who had you been dating?
Totally fed up. A variety of males I'd been dating.
A variety of males.
Yes. Yeah, I did have a long-term relationship with a man in Delaware who then came down to Atlanta with me, Michael. But he's in the past now. And then in 1978, I went to a women's consciousness raising group. And lo and behold, I met Elizabeth there.
And you instantly connected?
How did you know that?
Well, I was straight. I mean, I never even met a gay person. I mean, I really hadn't. And she just came right into the group and said, I'm a lesbian. And I was like shocked at her candidness. And she's still very candid about that, now that I think about it, right? I was really very surprised how open she was, and I really liked her. And so we became friends, and within, I guess, a few months, we became lovers, and the rest is history. We got married in 1981, and we've been married for 23 years.
How did the community react to your partnership at the time? How were you accepted or rejected, or what was?
Well, fortunately, right around that time, I decided to go to chiropractic school. I was really looking for a career change, and going to chiropractic school was the best thing, because I immediately hooked up with the other lesbians and gays at the school. So I was kind of sheltered from the straight world, because we had our own little community. We did our own parties, and we hung out together at the school, and so I didn't interact with the rest of the community that much. But I will say this, my very first day of chiropractic school, I was outed because I was on the 5 o'clock news because I had been protesting the movie Cruising the weekend before, with part of my gay activism. And so I was outed from day one, so it kind of saved me from having to come out to people, which I honestly have had a hard time doing my whole life. I have trouble outing myself to people. So that was easy because it was done for me.
So tell us about, you really didn't know anything about the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBT community until you met Elizabeth and got involved with Elizabeth. And then,
right.
And then when you sort of became part of the community, what was it like in 78? Was it scattered, or?
Well, when I met Elizabeth, she was living with Ray Kluka.
Ray Kluka.
And they were kind of best buddies. And she introduced me to Ray Kluka and Ray's friend Dennis Jackson, and the four of us became instant friends. And one day we were sitting around, and I got this brilliant idea that we should all get involved with some of the gay politics, and we should join, what was the name of that organization that we joined? Do you remember? We met at Georgia Tech, and
I think it was a student
was it
organization.
for?
It was a Georgia Tech student.
It was at Georgia.
But it was
the meetings were there, but I don't think it was related to the school. So the four of us, got involved, and before long, Ray became president of that organization, and we all got very actively involved. And I believe that's when we got involved with planning the Southeastern Conference, which was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, right? At the university there.
I think it was the fall of 78.
So that's really when I got involved with the gay community. And people were wonderful. It was great, and it was great to belong to a group that you felt comfortable in. And you know, we made some of our best friends those years and had some wonderful times together, and felt like we were doing the right thing, and we were helping our country to learn more about gay and lesbian rights and help make some changes.
Did you find Atlanta was a fairly open city?
I'm not sure how to answer that, because I am an optimist.
Okay.
And I honestly hear about the homophobia, but I don't notice it that much.
Mm-hmm.
And I, thank God, personally have never had anything done to me. Nobody has ever hurt me, you know, even called me names or persecuted me for being gay. There's lots and lots of subtle homophobia out there, but my personal experiences were positive.
Okay.
So, I mean, I know there was a lot of stuff going on. You know, there was gay bashings, and you know, there was a lot of nasty stuff going on. But I felt protected in my community and really had mostly positive experiences.
So, what did you do to help put together the National March on Washington?
What did I do? Well, we attended a lot of meetings. Yeah. We organized the food. We took tons and tons of food up, and when we were up there, I think we helped with the food service as well.
Okay.
We made tabbouleh. I'll never forget the tabbouleh. This is really a funny story. We bought crates and crates of vegetables, and we had to cut them all up, and we had so many vegetables we had to put them in the bathtub to wash them. And so we made this humongous quantity of tabbouleh, and I mean, what do you put it in? So we bought a new trash can, and we put a trash can liner in it, and we made the tabbouleh in that, because we were trying to feed, you know, like, I don't know, 3,000 people. So now we had to figure out how to get it from Atlanta to Chapel Hill. So we put it on a luggage carrier that was on the top of my car. It was a trip, but we did make it up there. We got it there.
It didn't end up on the highway?
No, a little bit of the olive oil started dripping down the windshield just about when we got there. But other than that, it didn't end up on the highway. So, and that was when we met Greg.
Okay.
And you.
Okay.
We met Greg and you, I believe, at that.
Greg, what's his last name?
Greg James.
Greg James. Okay. And
A very dear friend of mine who lives in San Francisco presently. Has for quite a long time.
quite a while, yeah. I wanted to ask you, the National March on Washington, that was 10 years after Stonewall. So did you have a sense of people commemorating a decade-long movement, or you want to say anything about that? They were kind of saying, "Oh, well, we're 10 years old," and
they were. What was the year of that march?
1979, and Stonewall was
1979.
So
well,
it was the 10th.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it was the 10th anniversary, and we were all trying to get gay rights and going to Washington for that purpose. I didn't know that much about the history because I had only been in the community myself for a couple of years.
Right.
So I only knew about Stonewall, whatever I saw in a newsreel or, you know, video. But I do remember us all being down in Washington and marching together, and I remember the emotional intensity when the speakers were speaking. I don't even remember who the speakers were, but it was very emotional. It was neat. Definitely an event I will never forget.
That was the first national march.
Yeah. So I really feel good about having marched and supported human rights over the years, in whatever way we could.
Well, it sounds like once you got involved with Elizabeth, you just really plunged in and jumped.
We did.
You
We
were the
did.
one that said,
let's join an organization and do something.
I didn't realize you were the
Because I remember we're sitting around reading Creative Loafing or something, and, you know, we're bored, and it's like, you know, we should really do something. We should join a group so we can meet some people and get involved and support the community. So I think that's how that was born. But
now, this was all before the internet.
oh,
So,
definitely.
Right. So it was like really sort of like Stone Age in comparison, right? And we had to, I remember we had to do a lot of telephone trees and, you know, really basic.
Grassroots.
You know, yeah.
Well, they still do that. That still works the best.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, than internet, I would imagine.
Yeah. Calling people up.
So you continue your activism?
I did continue my activism in in Hartford. Initially, we were fairly involved, and we went to the gay pride marches every year, and we joined. We were starting our practice, and busy trying to build our practices, and we joined the Capital Region Business Guild, which was a gay business guild of other gay business owners, and our goal was to help promote gay businesses and trying to get community to use us for their services. So, I moved up in that organization, eventually was president of that group for a couple of years, and then the group kind of dwindled after a while. They couldn't find anybody else who wanted to lead it, and it was more men than women. There were less women in the group. Less women business owners, right? Especially a while back. And it was hard to get the lesbians to get involved in groups that were mixed, men and women. I think when we got up there, the lesbians were much more separatist and did their own thing. And Elizabeth and I have never been that way. Mm-hmm. So
tell me
we didn't get as involved with that.
After the National March on Washington, then in the next year, 1980, what was that whole issue about cruising, about the movie?
Do I remember the movie? I never even saw the movie.
Right.
But it was, I believe it was a violent movie about gay sex
gay
and about,
murders,
gay bashings. There was a lot of gay bashing in it.
A lot of murders, too.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was pretty awful, and fortunately, it didn't last too long. There was a lot of protesting, and not that many people saw it.
Well, I remember that you were, they interviewed you on local TV, right? Because you talked about how you kind of came out at the
You know what? It was
school.
downtown here somewhere, too. I'm kind of remembering that. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was somewhere in this area.
I think it was the Tower
Wasn't
Place.
it?
I think it was up in Buckhead at the Tower Place movies. I seem to remember that you were interviewed on the plaza there. But now, were you one of the, oh gosh.
Should I get that? It's probably Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Hello? Speaking. Right. Sure. Okay, great. All right, bye-bye. Sorry about that.
Were you kind of, was that, do you remember what organization that was protesting the movie?
No.
You don't? Okay.
I
because
don't.
I was thinking that you were one of the leaders because you were the one who was interviewed. So I think you and Elizabeth were kind of...
We may have been. I don't remember.
Okay.
I think Ray was more actively involved. I'm not sure exactly why they interviewed me, except I was there and I was willing to speak on camera, which a lot of people were afraid to do that.
Right.
To speak on camera because, they didn't want to be outed.
Right. So there was
and at that time, I didn't really care if I was outed. I was really okay with that.
Was part of that because you were a chiropractic student and you weren't that concerned about any repercussions, or you didn't feel like you had that much to lose? Or
I think it was because I just didn't care if other people knew I was gay. I was proud of being gay, and I was fine with other people knowing. And yes, I was fortunate that I was in that situation where I had quit my job and I was going to school, and I probably did have a lower risk level as far as that goes.
But most
So.
of all, you felt really proud of who you were.
Yeah, I did. I did. I really did. So, I mean, Elizabeth and I have always been very publicly out, you know, holding hands, getting up and dancing at an event where two women don't get up and dance. I mean, we've been doing stuff like that, like, really from the beginning. And
Here.
oh,
Let me.
did she knock? Well, she's
Yeah.
got a key.
Here, let me. Here, stay put.
Oh, it's probably housekeeping because they haven't cleaned the room yet. Just tell them to come back.
You're doing great.
Thank you.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Yes.
Is this my room?
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you?
Did someone tell me that?
Is this my room? We wondered why you knocked.
Oh my God. Hi.
This is Audrey. Elizabeth,
Nice to
Audrey.
meet you. Hi.
These family therapists are so crazy. You've got to like.
Hang on. Okay, we're rolling.
Well, because I can ask her about Ray,
What'd you think?
but I would like to ask you about Ray too, because
Okay.
she knew Ray longer. I mean, she knew Ray before,
Yes.
and then they were living together.
And she has a much better memory than I do.
Okay,
So she can
okay.
probably share more details that I might be fuzzy on.
Okay. Well, let me ask you. So when you met Elizabeth, then was she living with Ray at the time
She was.
in this house on Park?
Or tell us about the circumstances of Ray and Elizabeth.
Well, I think she should tell you those circumstances, but
Okay.
she was staying with him. I don't think she was living with him for a very long time, but shortly thereafter, she moved in with me. I was living in a house with a couple of other women, and so Elizabeth moved into my bedroom, so there was not 3 women then, there was 4 bedrooms, but there was only 3 bedrooms, so she had to be in my bedroom. And that worked out really well. She lived there the 4 of us all lived there for, I think, about a year. The other 2 women were straight, and then I think after they moved out, didn't Ray move in? Ray and Dennis moved in. So the 4 of us were living together on Park Drive, 394 Park Drive. Yeah,
Okay.
those were very happy years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know on the way over here, David described that situation like it was a family. You
It
were
was.
a family.
We totally were family.
How so?
How so? Well, you know, we didn't have our families around to do holidays, and like so Thanksgiving was us, you know. We would do that stuff with each other. That's what we all did. And everybody in Atlanta developed their family with their friends. And my life has changed now. We're much more involved with family up north. But when we were here, we didn't have family, and everybody was in the same situation. Plus, being gay, it was a little bit different, too. So,
And for a long time, you didn't let your parents know about your relationship with Elizabeth.
not for long.
Oh, okay.
No, I came out to my parents when I graduated from chiropractic school.
Okay.
So I had been with Elizabeth 4 years, and we'd gotten married in '81. And my sister was at the ceremony and stood up for us and accepted Elizabeth as her sister, and she was wonderful. She still is wonderful, very supportive of our relationship. And I didn't tell my parents till '82,
Okay.
which did not go over very well.
Okay.
My father was very, very upset and insisted they leave Atlanta immediately. In fact, he wanted to leave in the middle of the night because he was so upset about it. Even though they already knew her, she'd been home for Passover Seders a couple years already. They loved her and cared about her, but once they heard that, they weren't happy. My mother was more supportive because my father had such a strong reaction. I think people do that, you know, and mothers tend to understand more than fathers do, or at least in my family, that's how it was.
He didn't threaten to sit Shiva or anything like that, did he?
No, he didn't. But they left like the next day or 2. And then for the next year, he was very cold, and it took time. And eventually, he and Elizabeth became best friends. I mean, you know, they were best buddies for many, many years, and he loved her like a daughter. He really did. But it took him about a year. But my parents are really basically very liberal, so, you know, they just needed time to adapt, as I think most parents do when they find out their kids are gay. And I consider myself very fortunate that my parents were so accepting and loving. And Elizabeth's family also has been very accepting and loving. Her mother has been very kind to us, and you know, I'm a member of her family and she's a member of mine, so that all worked out very well. I consider us extremely lucky.
So when you were in Atlanta, Ray was like your brother? Ray Kluka was like your brother? One of your brothers?
He was like a dear, dear friend.
Okay.
I've never had a brother, so I can't relate to that term, honestly. You know, it's like, I've never thought of anybody as my brother, but he was a very close friend of ours.
Okay. And he became very involved, and you kind of got him started, I guess, in activism or whatever.
I don't know if I actually got him started,
Well,
but I'd like to think of it that way.
Joined the group, and then he became the leader of.
He became the Gay Center in Atlanta. He was instrumental, I believe, in getting that started, and he ran it for several years. I don't know for how many years before he passed away.
Eva, one question I have is, what is your advice, if you could offer some, to someone, perhaps a woman, a guy, who now perhaps is considering coming out or wants to get involved? What did you learn from your experience that you would perhaps like to share some words of wisdom?
Well, I think that people who don't come out to their families are at a great loss because, you know, they're living a lie. They can't be honest with their families about who they are, and if you can't be who you are, it's a terrible way to live. And a lot of people are closeted at work too, and it's, you know, I've enjoyed being out my whole life and not having to worry about that. But I know it's not as easy for everyone. But I would certainly encourage people to come out if they feel safe enough to do that, and you know, if they feel the repercussions are not going to be harmful, which of course we never really know for sure. But
do you see differences between then and now? That it's easier for people to come out now?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. I think the world is much more comfortable with the gay lifestyle, much more desensitized to it. There's a lot more groups of families, parents of gays that are going on, and I think it's a whole different world than it was.
And yet what I think is so interesting, and maybe because of that comfort, that's where you get this strong backlash from the neoconservative, whatever you want to call them, people who, you know, really they do feel threatened. All the institutions, and maybe it's because there is such a vast majority of people, maybe even the silent majority, who say this is the way it should be. I mean, gay rights are human rights, and yeah. So I don't. That's what I'm thinking, because I know there's such a strident, stringent, you know. Why do they want special rights?
But I hope it's a minority, because I mean there's a lot more people who are more comfortable with the gay lifestyle than were 20 years ago, for example. I mean, this whole gay marriage thing is like unbelievable that it's even being voted on. Yes, it's being shot down in most states right now, but eventually they're going to pass the bill everywhere.
Because we weren't talking about gay marriage in 1979.
No. Are you kidding me? It was like the furthest thing from anybody's mind that it could ever become a legal institution. So I think it's just, I think it really shows how far we've come.
David, is there anything more you'd like to ask? Or
I don't know, do you anything more you want to say?
Just that Elizabeth and I were legally married in Massachusetts.
Yay!
Recently, in June. Oh yes, and I was going to show my certificate.
Hang on, we shall.
The marriage license, the real marriage license.
There we go. Elizabeth, you want to come in behind her sort of?
Yes, because I've been talking about you for an hour, but you haven't been in the picture at all.
And here she is!
And here she is, my sweetheart.
Hey, I'm going to do that again. I got to get it tight.
Do it again. Do it again.
And again. Okay, now don't get excited. This is a picture of our ceremony, which was a Justice of the Peace ceremony. Maybe followed by a bigger ceremony, possibly.
Our cantor was there for it.
Yes, our cantor was there and sang for us. And this is the certificate of marriage. I don't know if you can see that. But it is the real thing.
Yeah,
so.
we needed to get blood tests.
Oh, you did?
Because Massachusetts requires blood tests, so there was a surprise.
And the truth of the matter is that I was really uncomfortable with it in the beginning, and I thought, well, what's the point? We got married, 20 years ago. I don't see the point of doing it. But now that we've done it, I'm really, really happy that we did it because I feel like it is really important.
Could you show me your wedding rings?
Sure. Our wedding rings are the same rings that we had made in Atlanta years ago by a jeweler in Virginia Highland.
But rumor has that I'm going to get a large diamond ring. So.
Not just a rumor, you will be getting one. Okay, well, Elizabeth, would you like to take the hot seat from me now for a while?
I'm going to turn this off and then the microphone on.
The Van Gogh vanilla vodka. It's very new and supposed to be very good.
So I want to ask you questions about yourself, and then I also want to try to talk about Ray and explain who he was and what he did.
Sure.
And we had some of that, but I think even more because you know the longest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, we're
So
ready.
I'll ask and then you ask, right?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
good.
shut up. I'll
Okay,
shut up.
okay.
I'm so,
No, I want you to
such
ask.
a big mouth.
I want you to ask questions at the end,
Yeah,
especially
I
if
gave
you
you so
see
much.
something
Yeah.
as
Fine.
especially with what you were saying about the perspective you have.
Yeah.
And,
Get her
I
some
liked
with
what you were
the
saying
Van
about
Gogh
what you said
vanilla.
about people.
I'm not gonna have it
Well, let's
yet.
just,
Oh,
okay, great. Okay.
Oh, I don't know.
Ready?
We're on.
Laura.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
What's your name?
Elizabeth Monahan.
Elizabeth Monahan. Okay. And this is September 9th, 2004 in Atlanta, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so can you tell me where you came from and,
Where did I come
where
from?
Did you grow
It's a
up?
deep
And-
question. Came from my mother's womb in Binghamton, New York, and was there till I was 18. Then I went to undergraduate school up in Geneseo, near Rochester, and grad school out in Northern Illinois University, and then followed a woman professor, lesbian professor of mine that I had a major crush on down to Atlanta. And then she dumped me 2 days later. So I lived in Atlanta for 7 years. I was active in college in the feminist movement and had started the first women's group on campus in undergraduate. And so when it came to Atlanta, moving into starting to do some work on the lesbian and gay movement seemed really natural to me. I'd also done some anti-war stuff and other stuff like that in college.
So do you see any relationship between the Vietnam, the anti-war, the civil rights, and the gay and lesbian movement?
Oh, a huge amount of difference. And in fact, I wasn't aware completely of my attraction towards women until two of my best friends who were also practicing heterosexuality at the time started this women's group on campus, feminist group. And a couple of lesbians came over to our house one time that were starting the group, and of course I was totally disgusted by them, and within 7 or 8 months I was dating my best friend who was also starting the group with us. And so there was one obvious connection personally, but just the fact that in 1972 there was a feminist group that was started at a state university, and there were several lesbians in it that were accepted and welcomed by many of the people there who were heterosexual. I think it's a big deal and says something, and so it's a huge amount of difference, you know, huge amount of similarities, I think, and I think that if you look back on the civil rights movement, the Jews, women, lots of other minority cultures helped, and I see the feminist movement as, even though there's been struggles, as being really, really important in helping the gay, lesbian, transgendered movement.
I'm going to put a little pillow behind your back.
Oh, okay.
You look okay, but I just think if you're...
I'm leaning a little bit.
Yeah, I just like, is that me or...
It's you. It's me.
Yeah, hang on a second. I'm going to put this on too. Just kidding.
You might want to talk about feminism then in terms of the lesbian movement. You know, like any correlations.
Okay.
Yeah.
You go.
It was really interesting because when some of my best friends brought the idea of starting a women's group on campus, which was revolutionary back in the early 70s, I had no problem with it at all, and it just seemed totally right. It completely fit in with any other political work I was doing. When I found out there were lesbians there, I got classically panicked and had a really homophobic response because it had hit a chord that I honestly didn't know was there, and neither did my best friend. In terms of the obvious relationship, well, for lesbians anyway, is that they both involve women. And so a woman not only has some struggles because she's been treated as minority culture in terms of rights and things like that through the years, but being a lesbian adds one more layer on that. One thing I've been proud of about the feminist movement is I think for the most part they've been really supportive of both gay men and lesbians. I know there's been some people that aren't, but the majority of people I think have been. And so that's been a really nice way of bringing that all together. And it almost seems silly talking about it now compared with back then, because I've lost track of how many presidents of now were lesbians, but that's when I was in school, it was cool to be bisexual. It was really very very trendy and very cool, and actually most of my friends at the time who started dating women ended up being permanently with men. I lost my train of thought.
Okay. When did you come to Atlanta?
I came to Atlanta after grad school in 1976, and I was here until Eva and I left to go back up north in '83.
And when did you meet Ray Kluka?
When I followed my, to be honest, I was actually also dating some men at that point, but was in love with this woman who's a professor, and was a professor that I helped hire up in grad school. She moved down here, and she was like 8 years older than me, blonde, beautiful, PhD. I totally was obsessed and admiring of her. So my first day down here, I'm staying at her house and thinking, okay, you know, this is going to be great. And she said, well, where are you going to live? And I'm like, you know, all of 23 and a half years old. I'm like, what? And she said, well, you can stay here for a couple nights. My friends and I are going out now. And so it became obvious that, you know, that I was, as I look back on it now, and I'm a family therapist and treat a lot of lesbians and gays. I've seen this like a billion times now, but as I look back on it, it's obvious that she wanted my relationship and sort of valued it when she was up there and couldn't be out, or felt she couldn't be out. But when she moved down, and there was a power thing that was going on, which I think is an important element when we're talking about all of this. And there was an power balance between us, even though I was a great assistant. She was a PhD, she was 8 years older. And I naively thought that she would certainly be in my life more. So one of the guys who I met down here, I met because he was a student of mine in grad school up in Illinois. And so I called him up because I'm like sitting there drinking a beer at probably 100 degrees down in Atlanta, you know, with a professional job, but that's about it. And I called him up, and he said he really admired me because I really helped him through statistics that I was teaching at the time. And he said, well, I've got a close friend of mine that's living down here. His name is Ray Kluka, and he's from Illinois. He went to NIU also. And maybe you could stay with him for a few days. Well, that started Ray Kluka's and my relationship. We hit it off incredibly well. I'd never known him from Northern Illinois University. I was in grad school and from New York, and as a grad assistant, I was really isolated in the sort of little tower where grad assistants and professors hang out, and didn't know anyone else. And so he was very friendly, very open. We discovered we had a lot of interests, one of them being gay, even though I still had a boyfriend in Connecticut. I wanted to be gay. And so, and he certainly was gay. And so we had two things in common. We both wanted to meet someone of the, you know, respective same gender. And we both had gone to school in Illinois. But he also really did feel like my brother. I became close to him so quickly, and he had hardly any gay male friends, very few. And most of my relationships with most guys were dating them, or friends, but friends, and some of that was sexual energy was lots of times in there, which I think it's hard to not be sometimes in heterosexual friendships. But with Ray, there wasn't any of that. So I think that helped let me become closer to him much quicker because he was safe. And he just got a kick out of me, and I figured since I was looking for women, I was safe. And I had the male part covered by someone else, so I wouldn't hurt him that way. But we just really liked each other and lived together for, I think it was at least a couple years. And then there was a short time that I lived apart and met, actually Eva and I met, did Eva talk about that earlier? In a,
But you can talk about it.
yeah, we met in a women's consciousness raising group, and I raised her consciousness. And so after 4 or 5 months and Ray's wonderful encouragement, something finally happened with Eva and I. And I went away for the summer, but when I came back, we all moved in together in a house that Eva had on Park Drive, yeah, near Piedmont Park. And he is totally accepting of Eva as I was, and we, I guess, became political at the same time. In a sense, I was more involved in more political things than he was when I was in school, because you know, the feminist movement, when the war was happening, all of that was, you know, was really an important time for me. But he certainly was open to it, and I think maybe been involved in more traditional politics. But it's incredibly non-judgmental. When I think about it, he was just so accepting, and he had a great sense of humor, and took us a long time to realize that we kept going to gay bars together trying to meet people, and yet we were a man and a woman, and neither one of us you could really sort of, people didn't like look at and necessarily say they're gay. You know, I think my hair was longer and curly or something, and and so we realized, gee, maybe thought, if people think we're together, we should separate when we go to the bars. And then you know, the political work was, I think, you know, part of what I miss the most about being down here.
So you got real involved with putting together the first National March on Washington?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I was one of Ray and Eva and I and several other friends got involved with that, and I became elected a delegate. So I was flown to Houston as a delegate from the Southeast to this huge Congress, which was very big for back then, about the National March on Washington and lesbian and gay rights. So that was really incredible, and led us to be involved in a lot of other gay political things, like the Southeastern Conference for gays, lesbians, and transgendered. Forgive me, I can't remember all the exact terms because the exact wording would change year to year, and there was always a little, be careful. But we got very involved in that, and then became Southeast coordinators for that. And when I moved up to Connecticut, we tried to start some, in '83, even I tried to start doing more of the gay political work, but we joined a business guild, gay business guild, and discovered that 80% of it were like male Republicans who couldn't understand why lesbian should be in the name of the business guild. And I thought, oh my God, I wasn't even an adult during a time like this. Wherever I was in my life from when I was 18 on, would think that it was the most stupid question. And here these guys were, gay means both, that's divisive, you shouldn't say lesbian. And so, you know, we hung in there. I think at one point we became officers. At one point Eva became president, I was vice president. We really tried, but it seems that so many of them were about being Republican and money as small business owners that it didn't give us at all what we wanted, and it was quite a shock having come from Atlanta. I didn't know how good I had it down here and how far ahead. The South, who everyone always says, or a lot of people of North say, are behind, even though I think they now make exceptions for places like Atlanta, was incredibly further ahead than the folks up in New England were.
Let me ask you again about that Congress. That was probably like mid-1979, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in Houston, and people came from all over the country.
All over the country, and it was huge. It was. I'm picturing it like being 1,000 people, but it probably was more like 300 or 400, because I'm just thinking of what it cost to send us and that sort of thing. And there was only 1 or 2 representatives from each area. But it was so exciting to see lesbians and gays from all over the country. And I was amazed that it seemed like we got it together so quickly. Of course, I was in high school during Stonewall, so I didn't have the perspective quite the same. But still, to start working on this thing and then to be flown halfway across the country and feel this incredible power of people being very professional and very dedicated to something that now is taken for granted. Of some of my young lesbian clients always will say to me, the ones that are more political, or at least aware, they're not doing anything consciously, except being out, but are more aware, say that, you know, we stepped on your backs to get to where we are, and we'll always be grateful to you for that. We know how much easier you've made it for us, and it's really, I think, nice to hear, because like our nieces and nephews are so incredibly supportive, and my one niece just wrote an article in the school newspaper about gay marriage and how totally upsetting and ridiculous it was that it wasn't legal throughout the whole country. She's very much heterosexual, at this point anyway, it's almost 16. But it's really neat to see how far that's come.
Do you want to say anything about the National March on Washington, what you remember from being there?
Okay, except for this.
Do you have any pictures of that here?
Yeah, yeah.
I remember it, the whole thing being so exciting in terms of organizing it. And I remember loads and loads and loads of meetings, mostly in hot rooms. And I remember it being very much women and men, and us all really becoming friends. Even though there were some ways that we were pretty different, in terms of professions or things like that, we knew what we wanted to do, and I think it's just amazing that people all over the country were doing that, and that we got together and had a mission statement and had objectives and pulled this thing off. And being up there is just a blur of like being excited all of the time, and huge numbers of people. Having been to several marches after that, like when we had the march on against Anita Bryant, and the floor against orange juice, I don't know. It's for fruits anyway. Those were all wonderful, but it's so funny because I don't feel old enough to say that I helped organize a march that long ago, because I still feel 35. And so when people talk about going to the marches down in Washington now, and I need to get to one because I haven't been to one in a while, I can count the years, but I don't really have the perspective, because I guess I know I'll never become one of those Republicans. And it kept going. The March in '79 feels to me, from at least at my age then, and my awakening in college and political awakening, it seems to me to have really been a significant event in starting a trend. I think a marker as big as Stonewall, at least, 10 years later, starting a trend of fighting for gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered rights that takes different forms, but keeps going and going and going. I get a bit afraid sometimes now of the way of complacency. And I confess that it's really hard for me to relate when some of my clients are very closeted at their job and stuff, and they're half my age and they're closeted. Well, no, I think it's impossible they'd be half my age, but be 10 or 15 years younger or something. We can't be children. But, and I think, my God, how can you give these men that you work with at these jobs, so much power? How can you do that? I don't get it. I don't get it. And so, I need to be patient, and I'd like to think that sometimes people see Eva in my relationship as a role model. I'm very out to most of my clients. But feel, I guess, in very different circumstances, but both oppression, feel like it's the same as the Holocaust, that we can never forget. We can never forget, and if we don't keep talking about it, and we don't keep remembering, and telling people of our kids and their kids and everyone else, then it'll happen again. That oppression will happen again. And gays and lesbians will start getting killed, raped, all sorts of terrible things for being who they are.
You want to say some more about Ray, about what he went on to do? He became real active in different organizations.
Oh yeah, Ray really as I had moved off after grad school into teaching and then into being a therapist, I was involved politically, but I sort of had two careers because I also had my professional career. And Ray made his professional career doing incredible work for the gay and lesbian community. That was his job. That was the only job he wanted. And he put his heart and his soul into it. Being the director of the Gay Center, turning that into an incredible building and place to be that, when I think back on it, still rivals Hartford's, by the way. Even though there's a lot more money up there in the gay community, that was just a wonderful place to be. And then working for becoming a, I believe a city councilman in Midtown, and continuing to work, you know, at the Gay Center. Basically anything, writing for Etc., which is a gay newspaper. Anything that had to do with making it better for gay people and having us have a voice heard was where Ray was. And I was so shocked when he died. He's the first person I ever knew that had AIDS. And as he got sicker and sicker, I was up in Connecticut and we'd talk and come down some. But I remember getting the call. And he was working for Etc. still and some other papers and doing some other political work then. I didn't know how he could do it with how bad he was feeling. And I remember my mom being with us. And Ray and I were the same age. We were like a month apart. And I think we were either 35 or 36. And I just burst out crying and couldn't stop. And my mother's trying to comfort me. And, you know, I just kept saying, we're too young for this. Nobody dies at this age. He's lost more than half his life. And there'll never be another Ray. And there'll always be a special place in my heart for him. And I hope that the community in the Southeast and Georgia and Atlanta will remember him as I do. Because he certainly was one of the backs that people now stand on as they move ahead.
See, people now they don't know who he is.
And that's incredibly sad to me, and gets me a little worried, as I talked earlier about when it's not kept alive, when the history's not kept alive. We didn't know about AIDS. We didn't know about HIV. He was living a lifestyle not different than loads of single gay men. We had no idea. And our ignorance, I just think, was kept from us by the government and by medical people, and the slow reaction, incredibly slow reaction, the health and medical and government officials had to the whole disease. 'Cause, 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 'cause shortened his life quite a bit.
So you're not a fan of Ronald Reagan?
That would be an understatement. I felt like I was going to a funeral the day after he was elected, the day that we got the results. And it's terrible, but I remember being happy. I was at an AMFT conference, and these folks appear to be becoming a little more gay every year. They've been studying us, and now there's, this full days on gay and lesbian relationships, and I've stopped going to them because either I present or I don't go to them because they're really, I should be teaching them. But I forgot the question.
We were talking about Reagan, and you were talking about...
Oh, yeah.
This talks about all the
And
changes.
so everyone's so upset about AAMFT people, about Reagan, and how terrible it was that he was shot. And I honestly, it's terrible to say, but I wish that he'd die or become disabilitated enough to not stay in office. And I think anybody who values how far we've come in all these different rights, civil rights, gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual rights, women's rights, I just hope they know who they're voting for in November, and realize that we're becoming increasingly close to having our rights taken away. It scares me still.
Do you sometimes feel like we just keep fighting the same battles?
Absolutely. It's really kind of strange. The whole thing's sort of surreal because it's on some levels you see kids in school. It's in many of the high schools up there. I treat several lesbian and gay kids, and it's really pretty okay in a lot of the schools up there. It may not be that way in a lot of parts of the country, but for most of the schools in a lot of places up north, it's pretty okay. And so I see things like that. I see Eva and I getting married, legally married, which we wanted to do so much when we had our ceremony in 81. And I see things happening like California, but then I see this big X over it. They give it to us and they take it away. And things like the Defense of Marriage Act and actually thinking about having a law that could be passed to prevent marriage being anything other than heterosexual is outrageous to me. It's sort of, as people get more sophisticated about the gay and lesbian thing, they get more sophisticated about what they can take away. I guess it explains, what I was talking about earlier about some people still being afraid to be out. It's, I see why they're scared.
Do you want to ask a question, Dr.?
No, I think it's been
Okay.
incredible. You've got.
Do you want to say one more thing? Do you want to talk about Greg
I hate
James?
to say this, but I
You
think
gotta
I
go?
probably better get the
Okay.
photos because
Sure.
Okay.
We'll do it another
unfortunately,
time.
Yeah.
school buses.
Keep on forgetting
Well-
about Greg James.
So, Greg,
Go ahead.
I just want to end with saying that Greg James was also, and Dave Hayward were also very involved in the all of the movements that we're talking about, and became very close friends. I still see Greg, who's living out in San Francisco, and he and his social work lover, and Eva and I and some friends went to Ireland a couple years ago to celebrate my birthday. And it was quite wonderful. Ireland didn't know I had him, but he and his lover have a beautiful, beautiful voice, both of them, and they're in the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, and so I see them in New York occasionally, and you know, he's still doing it. I feel that's music, but that's political too. So it's wonderful that we're still around, a bunch of us, and in our own way, I think we're all still trying to make gains in movements. Some of us are doing it more by contributions now, because we're working 60 or 70 hours a week. Some of us are doing it more by being at every march, but we need all of it. So.
Great.